Remember that scene in The Empire Strikes Back where Luke meets Yoda for the first time? Luke, set to train in the ways of the Force, expected to meet a warrior and hero who looked the part, like Pedro Pascal in, Pedro Pascal in anything, really. Instead, though, Luke was greeted by a green, 2-foot-tall, backwards-talking philosopher who helps himself to Luke's supplies. Yoda is an ancient, wrinkled creature living in a swamp on Dagobah. The wisdom, courage, and heroism Luke sought were right in front of him the whole time, just not in the package he expected. That's us waiting for Jesus. Most Christians expect Jesus to return in the same first-century Middle Eastern Jewish package described in the Bible. But 2,000 years of waiting suggests that might not be the case. And our understanding of how the universe recycles matter and energy indicates that corporeal identity, the idea that our body is our eternal self, simply isn't how life and death work. Since childhood, I've struggled with the Christian idea that one day Jesus will return in his first-century body. An enlightened spiritual leader coming back from death, usually after some time in the underworld, is a myth found in every culture. The concept of divine resurrection is nearly as old as humanity, so I understand why there's a similar legend for Jesus too. But it's not really Jesus' return itself that bothers me, but the reason that Christians believe Jesus will come back, which is to divide the world into believers and others. They would have us think Jesus is returning as judge and jury, the ultimate emperor, a heartbreaking irony considering he gave his life trying to dismantle the empire. I think not. I believe Jesus has already returned many times over. More importantly, Jesus is continuously returning every day, right here, right now, in every heart, learning compassion, bending toward justice and equity, in every person protesting the empire, in every voice shouting, enough, enough bloodshed, enough homelessness, enough hungry children, enough politics as usual. When I talk about Jesus returning in all of us, I actually mean it literally. Consider what happens when a body dies. The matter that comprises that body doesn't disappear, it transforms. The carbon in your bones becomes soil, and the water in your cells evaporates and falls elsewhere. The energy that animated you, your consciousness, your unique frequency in the conscious universe, does not vanish. Not only matter, but energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. So, when Jesus died, the programmable matter comprising his corporeal being merged back into the supreme consciousness, the source of all matter, and the laws of physics that govern our multiverse. His unique frequency, his specific expression of awakened consciousness, also returned to the fundamental field from which all things originate for redistribution. Were the conscious manifestation called Jesus to return, we wouldn't know what he looks like because his energy has been redistributed throughout the multiverse. So I think the concept of Jesus' return as a single person is just mistaken. That's an outdated way of thinking also, an archaic and misogynistic great man theory of history, right? The belief that lone heroes swoop in to save us, usually from ourselves. It's a comforting illusion, but it is not how consciousness evolves. Jesus' consciousness, his love, his compassion, his radical acceptance of outsiders, and fierce resistance to empire doesn't need to show up in a single body. Excuse me, that didn't exactly work out so great from the first time anyway. Instead, Christ consciousness manifests in billions of bodies across the entire universe, wherever beings are waking up to who they are, explorers for a very conscious and very aware universe. When Jesus returns, he returns as us, all of us. And I remain hopeful in these dark times because Jesus is returning all over the world all the time. I mean, honestly, This is part of the reason that our world's in such turmoil. Millions of people are waking up to a higher consciousness. You can call it Christ consciousness if you want, though I hesitate because it's also Buddha consciousness and the consciousness of every spiritual master and indigenous elder who understood that we are connected to everything. It's the consciousness of every being who has realized we are created to work, live, and love together, not tear the world and each other to shreds so one of us can be king. We are created to build and explore, not destroy and close ranks. We are God consciousness awakening. Now, this awakening terrifies those who benefit from the old systems, who've built their identity and power on hierarchy, on domination, on the belief that some people matter more than others. To them, Christ returning through millions of ordinary people looks like the end of the world. And maybe it is. Maybe it's the end of their corrupt and abusive world and the beginning of the communal, equitable world we were always meant to create. Look around. Jesus is the immigrant at the border, carrying everything she owns in a backpack, believing against all evidence that the world might still have room for her. He's the queer kid in Nebraska who just came out to their parents, terrified and brave and more themselves than they've ever been. Jesus is the teacher who stays after school because she knows that one struggling student just needs someone to see them. He's the nurse holding a dying patient's hand at 3 a.m., making sure no one leaves the world alone. Jesus has returned as the organizer, knocking on doors in the heat, registering voters one conversation at a time. He's the parent teaching their kids that we take care of each other, that no one is disposable, that love is the only currency that matters. He's the person standing between the police and protesters, choosing de-escalation when everyone around them is choosing sides. Jesus is a mom and a nurse murdered by a mad king. The consciousness that animated that first-century Jewish mystic did not die. It's here. It's been here. It will always be here because God consciousness doesn't die. It keeps waking up in new forms, in new people, in new moments every single day. We must not be like Luke on Dagobah, waiting for a hero who looks the part, while the awakening we seek is already gestating inside us. The question isn't when Jesus will return or if he'll come back. It's whether we'll recognize him as already here in ourselves and act accordingly. Amen. Our question to consider today is, if Jesus returns through us, what does that demand of how we live? Let's take a minute or two just to consider that, and then we'll open up the room for discussion.